Alright, let's go over this one last time. My name's Meganimanic. I'm Vermont's one and only Spider Nerd. Okay, that's probably not true, but I have yet to meet another person with a Spider-Man themed Letterman jacket in the Northeast Kingdom. So, I've seen Across the Spider-Verse 3 times now, and I've just got to say, Sony. Well played, Sony. Well played indeed. Somehow, y'all are capable of the most two-faced productions I've ever seen. Venom and its sequel were mid, Morbius is a walking, talking meme with fangs, and I have some words about that Kraven trailer. Yet somehow y'all are actually able to put out some of the most enlightening, imaginative animation ever to grace the big screen. Seriously, you guys, this movie, as well as its predecessor, are gorgeous eye candy that are continually raising the bar on what animation should reach in terms of production and quality. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and this video won't simply be here to shill for Sony or Spider-Man. Because while this movie just about destroys the standard of animation, I do have some points I want to throw into the void and see if anybody else has the same thoughts. Across the Spider-Verse is a damn near perfect Spider-Man movie, and there's a bunch I want to talk about, so let's get into it. Here's your obligatory spoiler warning if you somehow haven't gotten to see this movie yet. So, right out of the gate, the animation in this thing is spot on. Just like the first entry, every iteration of Spider-Man and the dimensions we see are displayed in their own unique art style. You know, except for when there's a million of them on screen at the same time in a horde. Jessica Drew is a classic bold-edged comic character. Miguel O'Hara is covered in neon and pulsating energy. Spider-Gwen is swashed with pastel colors and paintbrush strokes. Pat Veer's circular motion aesthetic and costume redesign. Hobie Brown being a walking punk rocker's guitar case, which must have taken forever to figure out amid the rest of the characters. Ben Reilly's cel-shaded look with darker tones, and the time spent in Miles' dimension is spot on with the straight edges and hyper detail on everything. The smooth movement and vibrant colors in every single scene is a thing to behold. I don't think there's a single bad looking shot or set piece in this entire movie, whether it's close-up character moments and deep conversations, or the fast-paced and snappy action sequences. Everything looks smooth and is a treat for the eyes to behold. One of my favorite things about this franchise is that the artists pay specific attention to the color choices. When they want to theme decisions or places with certain characters, the color schemes regarding the theme are very thematic, and when you see those colors, you know they relate to a certain idea or person. There's the obvious Spidey red and blue or black and red in regards to Miles. If there's pink or white in a scene, you know they're dealing directly with Gwen. When the spot is in frame, the black voids are accented with the orange from the collider he got his powers from. Green and purple are associated with a Prowler, so when you're dropped into Earth 42 and everything has this green haze and lightning, it's subtly laying out the twist pretty early on. This right here is one of my favorites though. The portals made by Miguel's Spider Society all have this red laser light hexagon with futuristic symbolism and design. However, after Gwen and her dad make up in her universe, the portal she opens with Hobie's device has the same kind of stickers and stamps design that his character leaves around. Such amazing attention to visual cues and themes. This movie is really great to watch. My favorite part of the movie was anything to do with Pat Veer. His movement style and Indian architecture redux on modern Manhattan was absolutely thrilling, but probably just as spectacular as his visual design is the audio design in this thing. So let me get this out of the way. Yes, Calling is iconic. Hummingbird has a pretty spot-on choice for the headphone scene. Silken Cologne slaps, but every time I hear the synth chimes of self-love, I get shivers up my spine and immediately feel like I could start falling forever. Metro Boomin's inspired music by Across the Spider-Verse is a soundtrack consistently filled with bangers, this is true, and Daniel Pemberton outdid himself on this movie's score. Holy every time I hear the stings and warbling of Spider-Man 2099's theme, I seize up in awe. The rampant approach of drum beats on the intro and outro theme get me so psyched up I just want to start running, dog. When Gwen, Jess, and Miguel are running around the museum to subdue the Renaissance Vulture, I cannot help but shout out to cheer them on. Spot's theme, this haunting cacophony of horns and strings building up in intensity gave me incredible dread. And the more times he powered up, the more horrible it got. And he did in fact turn out to not just be a villain of the week. You know what I noticed after the second time around though? There's a lot of bongos on this soundtrack. Even in Miles' themes, the bongos are used pretty heavy, which I think is neat. He still has the hip-hop vibe down pat, which very much matches with his identity, but the fact that the other instruments and sounds from the other cultures in this movie make their way into each other's themes is amazing. The record scratching and the Indian themes of Mumbattan, punk rock guitar riffs in the Nueva York chase, and the voice acting. Come on, do I need to even try? Shameik Moore brings it home as Miles. This guy was able to somehow keep the youthful expressions of a teenager and a hero discovering himself so effortlessly. He might be my favorite Miles voice actor. Oscar Isaac as Miguel O'Hara was a really good choice. He brings out this gruff, sorrowful older man voice that is somehow balanced by the hopeful humanity and the other spiders that bring out of his character. Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy never ceases to disappoint. Seriously guys, the amount of diversity and tone she's able to deliver is astounding. One scene, she's this stoic woman who's been through too much hurt. Then in the next, she's this really spry teenager looking for fun ways to pass the time. Daniel Kaluuya as Hobie Brown was also a spot-on casting. I spent a lot more time trying to decipher this thick British accent he brought to the table for the character, making his tone and inflections much more entertaining after figuring it out. Karan Soni as Padveer absolutely brought home that performance. I had to keep getting Dopinder's image out of my head while listening to his character, but all I got from his scenes was pure Indian youth. Amazing representation and quality voice work across the board from everybody involved. Despite the massive differences and visual identity, the sound team made it a point to find ways to unite this movie through its soundtrack, which really makes me happy. Speaking of massive differences, let's go over the main difference in plot between the first two entries so far into this trilogy. So this movie isn't about just a single universe colliding with multiple others anymore. No. If only things were that simple. Nope. This movie is about throwing our characters from single universes through multiple other universes. Miles goes on an epic adventure through multiple dimensions in this film, and it all stems from the villain introduced for this movie, the Spot. Seemingly an innocuous scientist with a full grasp on his abilities, Spot quickly turns from just another villain to a multi-dimensional threat over the course of this movie. Flat out, love this evolution. Spot was a C, maybe B-tier villain in the comics after his creation. In fact, in a recent interview, his inclusion for this movie wasn't considered at all until the writers actually took a look into his power set, after which it became all about using his abilities to new extents. I really enjoy when C-listers and below get upgrades like this for bigger audiences. The intertwined nature that Miles and Spot have for this movie is such amazing chemistry. There really isn't a character I can think of in the comic books or animation that gives Miles a nemesis. He always just kinda ends up duking it out with Peter's rogue gallery, which can be kind of a bummer, but in the end it's Spidey's fighting Spidey's villains, so people don't really make a fuss about it. But this movie changes all of that. Having Spot be the source of Miles' powers and the two of them having this bitter rivalry that doesn't actually resolve by the end of the movie is some pretty great storytelling. It'll all hopefully get wrapped up by the end of the third installment, but it's a pretty difficult task to end it all so cleanly. They've created this weird duality between the hero and villain for the saga, so now there's going to be some thematic way to end it all. What I really appreciated about this movie was that nothing really seemed out of place. Like, yeah, the movie had obvious cameos for the sake of cameos, but nothing felt like it was there just to be there. Even Ben Reilly, who, yeah, I wish had a little bit more to do in the movie, was included for little screen time, but it served a purpose. After Spot's escape in the Collider in Mumbattan, the tone of this movie shifted drastically. It dealt with edgy sob stories about death and sacrifice, and while the movie takes its time to talk about those, the pace was so fantastic that it didn't dwell on them and made sure to use characters that are known for their dark past to make light of a situation that desperately needed it. Things like the appearance of Spider-Rex and the cat in the car. It was also in line with a comic story that I couldn't gripe about their appearances. Everything just seemed very well thought out. From using specific characters and specific moments to evolving already existing character stories, the writers seem to have a damn fine idea of where they wanted things to go with this film. And dear god, the twist end and the cliffhanger. It's like Infinity War all over again. While I had a bombastic time looking for the little clues and hints throughout this movie on the second and third runs, I will admit I have some things that stood out to me about this movie that I felt like I needed to share. Okay, so here's a hot take. The Spider-Verse saga is no longer and has probably never been about Miles Morales. Now I know, this movie's protagonist is literally Miles, so how could this franchise not be about him? Well, consider this. How does both Spider-Verse movies so far open up with? If you can't exactly recall, I'll just show you. Into the Spider-Verse opens with an introduction to Peter Parker's Spider-Man, the one who dies during the Collider incident and passes his torch to Miles. Across the Spider-Verse opens with an introduction to Gwen Stacy's Spider-Woman, who's grown a bit but has never gave us her origin story in the first film. It isn't until after each of these prologues that Miles enters the scene. And while the narrative would play out from Miles' point of view from here on out, he is almost never a main factor in anyone's story until the instant the Collider is triggered. Miguel doesn't know about him until then, so Spot doesn't care about him till then, so Gwen Stacy doesn't even know he exists or anything of the sort. When it's revealed that the spider that bit Miles came from another dimension, suddenly Miles turns from a main character into a plot device. He instantly transforms from a person with goals and motives to an anomaly in literally every other dimension's existence. From Miguel's, and probably a decent amount of other spider people's, who Miles is doesn't matter. He's just a warped cog in the interdimensional machine. Which really sucks to think about because the first movie was definitely about a Miles Morales character study. He was an accident, a stroke of good luck that he was there to replace a dying Peter Parker, like it was always meant to be. But in Across the Spider-Verse, that happy accident turns into a terrible accident because his involvement in the Collider project unwittingly knocks over other terrible dominoes and brings havoc to other universes. Miguel's ambition is suddenly understandable, even if the way he goes about it is pretty horrifying. What gets me about Across the Spider-Verse is that the movie isn't any longer about the personal struggles of what it means to be Spider-Man and how his alter ego affects the ones around him. The stakes are drastically larger now, because by just announcing that Miles was never actually to become Spider-Man, his entire character shifts from reluctant hero to accidental tragedy. Miles isn't Spider-Man anymore. He's a poser, an anomaly. And while I don't think the majority of people see it that way, I can't help but feel sorry for this version of Miles. He definitely deserves to be Spider-Man, and the movie goes to extreme lengths to make the audience understand that he will always be Spider-Man. The entire conversation Rio has with Miles during the party scene is pretty much the perfect counter-argument to the point I'm trying to make. But I couldn't help but notice that from the outside looking in, Miguel is probably right about Miles and his existence. While I don't agree with his tactics, I definitely think Miguel and his allies are in the right in trying to subdue Miles and Spot. It's just the methodology that I can't defend. I think that makes Gwen's team the best versions of Spider-Man in this scenario, since they want to stop Spot from destroying dimensions, but also stop Miguel and Miles from making mistakes they'll regret. Hopefully this weird sensation I have will be validated by the third entry, but hey, only time will tell. Also, super duper minor nitpick about certain swinging scenes, but there are a couple of very obvious trailer shots still in this movie. Anytime that the swinging gets upended by a shot where Spideys are in complete still poses as the camera pans toward or away from them, you could tell that there was left in footage that they used for trailers and thumbnails and stuff during promotion. It really isn't a huge deal in retrospect, but it's kind of jarring when you take into consideration how fluid and dynamic the rest of the motion in this movie is. Anyway guys, that's my 2 cents on Across the Spider-Verse. I hope you enjoyed. This movie is beyond phenomenal. It is a gorgeous, action-packed adventure with stellar casting and storytelling. I can't wait for the third entry in this series. While I can't say it's my favorite Spider-Man movie, that's still No Way Home for me. And I think the best Spider-Man movie is still probably Spider-Man 2. Across the Spider-Verse is a close runner-up on beating both of those out. I just don't think it's totally fair to compare live action and animated movies, as there's a huge amount of storytelling you can get away with in animated media when compared to real people in acting. No matter how much emotion you can pour into your performance, your scenes with utter distress can't compare to a character whose world is literally closing in around them while he deals with it. And while Tom Holland's scope eye things that help convey focus and surprise, the fact that every character's masks can emote like that during these scenes just puts it in a league of its own. And considering the only animated Spider-Man movies to date are these two Spider-Verse movies, which have the same narrative, casting, and aesthetic, there really isn't much else to compare them to in a rating sense. I think Across the Spider-Verse is the better movie between the two, but Into the Spider-Verse is probably the better Spider-Man narrative with a much smaller scope and intimacy between the characters in it. But what did you guys think of Miles' latest journey in the Spider-Verse? Do you think the third movie will be able to top it? Will it have a happy ending or a sad ending for our hero? Let me know in the comments below. If you appreciated what I had to say or even agreed with me on certain things, give this video a like and subscribe to show your support. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about as people dissect each of these movies over the coming year till Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out. I think that's about all I have to say for now, so until next time, ladies and gents, Excelsior!